Shoot, you devil! Shoot in the devil's name! These were the last words ever heard by King William II of England, before an arrow ricocheted and pierced his heart during a hunting trip in the year 1100. What if I told you that the final moments of medieval kings, popes, and warriors reveal more about human nature than any history book ever could? Today, we're diving into the most haunting, profound, and sometimes downright bizarre last words from the Dark Ages. Words that echo through nearly 1,000 years of history. Some died with prayers on their lips, others with curses, and a few, well, let's just say they saw things that shouldn't exist. I'm your host, and this is Life in the Dark Ages. Let's begin this journey into the final moments of medieval history. Death in the Middle Ages wasn't just an ending, it was a performance. Your final words could determine how history remembered you, whether you'd be seen as a saint or a sinner, a hero or a coward. In an age where most people couldn't read or write, spoken words carried incredible power. And nowhere was this more true than in those final, desperate moments before death. Today we're exploring the last words of medieval figures from across Europe. From the mightiest emperors to humble saints, from battlefield warriors to dying popes. These aren't just historical curiosities. They're windows into the medieval mind, revealing the fears, hopes, and beliefs of an entire civilization. We'll journey through royal deathbeds and battlefield farewells, explore the final thoughts of Renaissance artists, and uncover the mysterious last words of religious figures who claim to see visions of the afterlife. But first, let me paint you a picture of what death meant in medieval times. Chapter 1. The medieval approach to death. In the medieval world, death wasn't hidden away in hospitals or whispered about in hushed tones. It was a public event, a community experience, and most importantly, a spiritual test. The medieval concept of ars moriendi, the art of dying well, was as important as the art of living well. Your deathbed scene could determine not just your earthly legacy, but your eternal fate. Imagine this. You're lying on your deathbed in the 12th century. The room is crowded with family, friends, clergy, and even curious neighbors. Everyone is listening intently to your every word, because they believe your final statements might reveal whether you're bound for heaven or hell. This is why medieval chroniclers were so obsessed with recording last words. They weren't just documenting history, they were documenting the moment when the veil between life and death became thinnest. The medieval worldview held that demons and angels literally battled for your soul in those final moments. Your last words were seen as evidence of which side was winning. With this understanding, let's examine some of the most fascinating final utterances from the medieval period, starting with the most powerful people of their time. Chapter 2. Royal Farewells. When Kings Face Eternity: Point. Medieval kings weren't just political leaders. They were God's representatives on earth, so when they died, their final words carried the weight of divine authority. Let's start with one of the most dramatic royal deaths in medieval history. William II of England. Picture this scene. August 2nd, 1100, in the New Forest of Hampshire. King William II, known as William Rufus, is hunting with his companion Walter Tyrrell. They spot a deer in the distance. The king shouts, "Shoot, you devil! Shoot in the devil's name!" The arrow flies, misses the deer, ricochets off a tree, and strikes the king directly in the heart. The irony is chilling. William's last words literally called upon the devil, and medieval chroniclers saw this as divine judgment. William II was known for his conflicts with the church, his apparent lack of piety, and his harsh rule. To medieval minds, his death wasn't an accident. It was God's justice delivered through his own words. But not all royal deaths were so dramatic. Some were surprisingly humble. Henry II of England. Henry II, one of the most powerful monarchs in medieval Europe, controlled an empire stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees, but in his final moments, he was just a broken father. When he learned that his beloved son John had joined the rebellion against him, Henry's last words were, "Let the rest go as it will. Now I care not what becomes of me." Shame, shame on a conquered king. Here was a man who had ruled for 35 years, who had built a legal system that still influences us today, reduced to despair by family betrayal. His final words reveal that even medieval kings were, At their core, human beings with human hearts. Edward the First of England. Now contrast this with Edward the First, known as Longshanks and the Hammer of the Scots. Even death couldn't stop his military ambitions. As he lay dying, just before his army was set to invade Scotland, Edward commanded, "Wrap my bones in a hammock and have them carried before the army, so that I may still lead the way to victory." This wasn't just bravado. This was a man so consumed by conquest that he literally wanted his corpse to continue the war. Medieval chroniclers saw this as evidence of Edward's terrible pride, the sin that, according to medieval theology, brought down angels and kings alike. Let's travel east to the final moments of the Byzantine Empire. Constantine the 11th. Constantine the 11th wasn't just any emperor. He was the last Roman emperor, the final link in a chain stretching back over 1,000 years to Augustus Caesar. As Ottoman cannons pounded the walls of Constantinople, as the city that had stood for over a millennium was about to fall, Constantine faced his end with these words: "So there is no Christian who wishes to free me from this life?" These weren't the words of a coward, but of a man who knew he was witnessing the end of an era. Constantine would die sword in hand, defending his city, his body later found among the common soldiers. His empire died with him. Chapter 3. The Papal Throne, when God's representatives face judgment. If kings were God's representatives on earth, then popes were his direct voice. Their final words were scrutinized for signs of divine approval or condemnation. Pope Gregory VII. Gregory VII was one of the most powerful popes in medieval history, a man who made emperors kneel in the snow and reshaped the relationship between church and state. But he died in exile, driven from Rome by his enemies. His last words were, "I have loved justice and hated iniquity. Therefore I die in exile." These words echo the Psalm 45. "You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore God has anointed you." Gregory was comparing himself to Christ, suggesting that his suffering was a sign of his righteousness, not his failure. Medieval chroniclers debated these words for centuries. Were they the utterance of a saint or the pride of a man who couldn't admit defeat? Pope Alexander VI. Rodrigo Borgia. Now let's examine one of the most controversial papal deaths in history. Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope, was known for his political scheming, his many mistresses, and his alleged use of poison against his enemies. As he lay dying from a mysterious illness, witnesses reported that he was hallucinating, seeing an ape running around his room. His last words were, "Let it alone, for it is the devil. I am coming, it is just." But wait a little. To medieval minds, this was terrifying confirmation of what they suspected, that Alexander VI was literally being dragged to hell by demons. The fact that he saw the devil as an ape was particularly significant, as medieval theology often depicted demons in animal form. Whether this was actual hallucination, fever dreams, or embellished chronicling, these words shaped how history remembered one of the most infamous popes, Pope Urban V. Not all papal deaths were so dramatic. Urban V, facing his final moments, showed remarkable transparency. "Leave the doors open so that everyone may enter and see how a pope dies." This was revolutionary for its time. Medieval death was usually a private affair for the elite, hidden behind closed doors. Urban V was essentially saying, "I have nothing to hide. Let the world witness my final moments." Pope Pius II. Pius II, a humanist scholar before becoming pope, showed remarkable insight into the nature of power as he died. One of the miseries of princes is to have flatterers even around their deathbed. Even in death, this pope understood that power corrupts not just the powerful, but everyone around them. His words reveal a man who had seen through the illusions of medieval hierarchy. Chapter 4. Artists and their final masterpieces. The Renaissance was dawning as the medieval period waned, and with it came a new type of celebrity, the artist. Their final words reveal the tension between medieval piety and Renaissance humanism. Leonardo da Vinci Cologne Point. Leonardo da Vinci, painter, inventor, scientist, the ultimate Renaissance man. Yet as he lay dying, speaking to King Francis I of France, his final words were deeply medieval in their self-reproach. I have offended God and mankind in not having labored at my art as I ought to have done. This is extraordinary. Here was a man who had painted the Mona Lisa, designed flying machines, studied anatomy, and advanced human knowledge in countless ways. Yet he died believing he hadn't done enough. This reflects the medieval concept of stewardship, that our talents are gifts from God and will be judged on how well we use them. Leonardo, for all his achievements, died with the medieval fear that he had wasted his God-given gifts. Perugino. Pietro Perugino, the Renaissance painter who taught Raphael, took a completely different approach to death. When offered the last rites, he refused, saying, "I am curious to see what happens in the next world to one who dies unshriven." This was almost unthinkable in medieval times. Perugino was essentially conducting a theological experiment with his own soul. He was choosing curiosity over salvation, knowledge over faith. His words marked the transition from medieval certainty to Renaissance questioning. The medieval world knew exactly what happened after death: heaven, hell, or purgatory. Perugino was among the first to say, "Let's find out for ourselves." Chapter 5. Saints and Scholars. Wisdom in the Final Hour. Medieval saints and scholars approached death as the ultimate test of their faith and learning. Their final words often revealed years of spiritual struggle and theological contemplation. Saint Francis of Assisi Francis of Assisi, the founder of the Franciscan order, lived a life of radical poverty and simplicity. His approach to death was equally radical. "When you see that I am brought to my last moments, place me naked on the ground, just as you saw me the day before yesterday, and let me lie there after I am dead, for the length of time it takes to walk 1 mile unhurriedly." Francis wanted to die as he had lived, with nothing, owning nothing, claiming nothing. His brothers followed his wishes, placing him naked on the bare earth. He spent his final moments in silent contemplation, having achieved what he saw as the perfect death: complete surrender to God. John the Almsgiver. John, the Patriarch of Alexandria, was known throughout the medieval world for his incredible charity. His last words perfectly reflected his life. "I always wanted to possess, at death, nothing but a bedsheet, and now this sheet can be given to the poor." Even in death, John was thinking about giving. His final act was to donate his burial shroud to someone who needed it more than he did. Berengar of Tours. Not all religious figures died with such certainty. Berengar of Tours was a theologian whose writings had been condemned as heretical by the Pope. His final words reveal the terror of a man unsure of his eternal fate. "Today, on the day of his epiphany, my Lord Jesus Christ will appear to me, either for glory, as I in my repentance should like, and as I hope, or for condemnation, as others would like, and as I fear." Berengar died on the Feast of the Epiphany, when Christians celebrate Christ's manifestation to the world. His last words show a man caught between hope and fear, between his own theological convictions and the Church's condemnation. This was the medieval intellectual's nightmare: to die uncertain whether your life's work had been in service of God or the devil. Chapter 6. Noble Ladies and Holy Women. Voices from the Shadows. Medieval women's voices are often lost to history, but their final words provide rare glimpses into the medieval feminine experience. Elizabeth of Aragon, Queen of Portugal. Elizabeth was known for her piety and her charitable works. As she lay dying, she suddenly spoke to her attendants, "Draw up a chair for the radiant lady in white who is coming. O Mary, Mother of Grace." Elizabeth claimed to see the Virgin Mary coming to escort her to heaven. In medieval theology, this was the highest honor: to be personally welcomed into the afterlife by the Mother of God. Margaret of Scotland. Not all medieval women died with such divine comfort. Margaret of Scotland was only 20 when she died, having been rejected by her husband, Louis XI of France, for failing to produce children. Her last words were bitter: "Fie on the life of this world. Do not speak to me more about it." Margaret's words reveal the crushing pressure on medieval women to fulfill their biological destiny. Her failure to bear children wasn't just a personal tragedy, it was a political disaster that destroyed her marriage and her life. Bridget of Sweden. Bridget of Sweden, the mystic and saint, died with the same words that Christ spoke on the cross: Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. These weren't just final words. They were a complete identification with Christ's suffering. Bridget was saying that her death was a participation in the divine mystery of salvation. Chapter 7. Warriors and their final battles. Medieval warriors lived by the sword, and their final words often reflected the code of honor that governed their violent world. William Marshal Colin. William Marshal is often called the greatest knight in medieval history. He served 5 English kings and was never defeated in tournament or battle. His final words were surprisingly humble. I am dying. I commend you to God. I can no longer be with you. I cannot defend myself against death. Even the greatest warrior in Christendom had to admit that death was the one enemy he couldn't defeat. His words show the medieval acceptance of mortality. Even heroes must yield to fate. Bertrand du Guesclin. Bertrand du Guesclin, the French military commander, used his final breath to give one last order about the conduct of war. Remember that your business is only with those who carry arms. The churchmen, the poor, the women and children are not your enemies. I commend to the king my wife, my brother. Farewell, I am at an end. This was the medieval code of chivalry distilled into final words. Even in death, du Guesclin was trying to limit the brutality of war, to protect the innocent, and to maintain honor. Jan Žižka. Jan Žižka, the Czech military leader, was known for his tactical brilliance and his fierce independence. His final words were as unconventional as his life. Make my skin into drumheads for the Bohemian cause. Žižka wanted his body to literally continue fighting after his death. His words reflect the medieval belief that physical remains could carry spiritual power and political power. Thorgrim, the Easterling Colin. Let's end with a story from medieval Iceland that perfectly captures the dark humor of medieval warrior culture. Thorgrim and his companions went to attack Gunnar Hamundarson at his home. Thorgrim climbed onto the roof, but Gunnar stabbed him with a halberd. When Thorgrim climbed down, mortally wounded, his companions asked, "Well, is Gunnar at home?" Thorgrim replied, "Find that out for yourselves, but I've found out one thing, that his halberd's at home." Then he fell down dead. Even while dying, Thorgrim couldn't resist a final joke. His words show the medieval warrior's acceptance of death with humor and defiance. What these words tell us. As we reach the end of our journey through these medieval deathbeds, what do these final words tell us about the people who spoke them and about the age they lived in? First, they reveal that medieval people faced death with the same mixture of fear, hope, defiance, and acceptance that we do today. Kings and popes, saints and sinners, warriors and artists, all were human beings confronting the ultimate mystery. Second, these words show us how deeply medieval people believed in the eternal consequences of their earthly actions. Death wasn't just an ending, it was a transition to judgment, and that judgment was based on how you had lived and how you died. Third, they demonstrate the power of language in medieval culture. In a world where most people couldn't read, spoken words carried enormous weight. Your final utterance could determine how history remembered you for centuries to come. But perhaps most importantly, these last words remind us that death is the great equalizer. No matter how powerful, how wealthy, or how holy you might be, everyone faces that final moment alone. And in that moment, pretense falls away, and we see people as they truly are. The medieval world may seem distant and alien to us, but these final words prove that human nature remains constant. We all face the same fundamental questions. How should we live? What happens when we die? And what legacy do we leave behind? The next time you visit a medieval cathedral or read about medieval history, remember these voices from the deathbed. They're not just historical curiosities. They're messages from our ancestors, reminding us that we're all part of the same human story. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the final moments of medieval history. If you found this fascinating, make sure to subscribe to Life in the Dark Ages for more deep dives into the medieval world. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the shadows of the past. Until next time, remember, we're all just temporary visitors in this world, and our words may be the only thing that truly survives us.